Some of you probably went to sleep last night mildly confused at how the jury in the Connecticut versus Valle case could be deadlocked after only 2 hours of deliberation. I'm going to explain it to you. Hi, Tony DeWitt here. I'm a Missouri appellate attorney, retired, and I bring you a fresh perspective on the law without offering any legal advice. So pull up a chair. This is what we're discussing today. Before I get there, let me tell you I'm sorry about missing the last couple of days. I really have been under the weather. Um, we went down to our house in Florida and had a lovely time on the beach until I had to mow the lawn, and then it pretty much wiped me out. I guess I got dehydrated and didn't feel too well for a couple of days. In addition, we had the grandchildren down there, and it probably would have been a little harder to record a cogent video with kids running around banging and making noise and that kind of stuff. And I don't want to be the kind of grandpa that yells, "Hey, you kids, shut up," because that's not who I am. So sorry about all of that. I'm back here in full force now. So in the Star Trek series, the original, we were introduced to a character by the name of Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy. And Leonard Nimoy, you could totally believe he was from another planet. He was completely logical. And, he'd tip his head and act like that's illogical. And of course, many of the things the humans do are completely illogical. And that's what's at issue in this deadlock. In case you didn't hear it, it's 11 to 1. It's a deadlock of 11 to 1 on the murder charge. Now, let me explain why that is. It starts with this.
He steps into this situation. Look at the amount of time between the time he steps onto the grass. And again, perspective. They want to try and tell you that that kid on the far side of him is not lined up with Mr. Valle. Look at the grass underneath their feet. Valle's on the grass. That kid's on the grass too. The line of the curve goes just like this. You know about horizon and perspective? They're almost side by side, those two kids. The other kids haven't gone anywhere. It's wet. You remember me asking all these kids, is it dark, wet, rainy, misty? I don't remember. You can see it in the video. You can see rain beating on the windows of the cars. Of course it's wet. And you heard Taylor Capella tell us, he came onto the grass and he slipped. He spun around. Mr. Valle told you, he got punched. Somebody swung at him. Did you see Matt Lockovich's hand on Jimmy's back? And all of a sudden it's gone. You can infer what happened there. Matt Lockovich takes a swing at him, and Mr. Valle told you, I just swung, I put everything I had into it, I was terrified. These kids hadn't stopped before when they were stomping me and I had to use that. They weren't stopping now. Did he have a safe retreat that he could completely and safely retreat? Of course not. Last time that he had tried to get up, these kids tackled him and went down again. And here they were coming again. And we know they were coming again because we hear them being warned. He's got a knife. He's got a knife. Again, you're not telling that to somebody who's not walking towards that danger you're trying to walk them off, who's not rushing towards that person once again. Mr. McGrath is holding the edge. These are all football players, right? They know what it means to hold the edge. He's holding the edge, that horseshoe, that semicircle. He is a threat just as much as anybody else in that mob at that point. Those are the circumstances that Mr. Valle was facing. That's what you have to judge.
It is perhaps a human failing that emotion tends to displace logic. You may have noted, for example, that certain politicians want to scare you into voting for them. Do this, or the other side is going to cause the end of the world. Do this, or millions of babies are going to die. Do this, or they're going to come and arrest your cat. Whatever it is, the whole idea behind scaring someone by saying all of these bad things are going to happen if you don't vote the right way, that is completely about control and emotion. When people are emotional, when they're worried about their cat and they love their cat or they love their child or they love something else, they are much more likely not to think critically and respond to that emotional argument. The argument that is being made here is an emotional argument. It is not a logical argument, even though it has components of logic in it. The reason it's an emotional argument is because the testimony that produced this argument, Valle on the stand, was itself very emotional.
Were you able to get up at that point? What happened next?
I kept flailing my arm around, just trying to get him away from me.
Were you aiming for anyone?
No.
Were you aiming for Ryan Hines?
No.
You weren't trying to kill Ryan Hines?
No.
And it is very easy to get caught up in feelings as opposed to applying logic. Now, most lawyers would tell you, yes, we want a logical jury. We want a jury that's going to see the facts and decide the right way because my side's right. What they often don't say is we want to manipulate the jury to see things in an emotional way so that our side wins. Now, listen, there is absolutely no set of circumstances in which lawyers don't do this. It's not an attempt to be dishonest. It's an attempt to prevail. It's an attempt to zealously represent the client. In wrongful death cases, what you have to do if you're a lawyer is you have to bring that person back to life for a few days in order to tell the jury what the plaintiff is missing. So you put the wife on the stand and they talk about long walks on the beach or the last cruise that they took, or the way he always got up on Sunday mornings and fixed breakfast for everybody. Whatever it is, whatever is needed to do to sort of humanize the person who passed away, that's what lawyers do. And then, if at all possible, you try very hard to make the other side look really bad. And you do that usually by saying things like, this bad company over here put profits ahead of people. And this is what happens. They cut 29 cents off the production costs of this item, and it wound up killing poor Mr. Smith over here. Those are the kind of arguments that are made not because they're logical, but because they work. And in a trial where you are trying to keep somebody out of jail for the next 60 years, that is, I think, what is at the heart of the matter. You have to use the emotion that you have in order to make it so that you can essentially put the jury into his shoes. You're being kicked and stomped and there are bad things happening. And yeah, I had an opportunity to run away, but the real thing is in the moment when I made that decision, I wasn't thinking about the opportunity that I had to run away. I wasn't thinking about why in the world did I go pick a fight with these boys over here. I was thinking about, geez, I'm gonna wind up getting the stuffings kicked out of me, and as a result, I'm gonna strike out and see what I can do. You use that emotional argument, the kicks, the blows, the trauma, all of that to try and manipulate the jury into seeing it your way. Now, in this case, prosecution did exactly the same thing. Poor Jimmy McGrath. I do feel very bad for the McGraths. They've lost a lot. They've lost a child. And I don't intend to minimize that. But essentially, what the prosecution was doing here is he was using poor Jimmy McGrath's death to get to Valle. And maybe that's the right answer. I don't know. I just know that that's what's happening here, and that for the most part, this is not transparent to the jurors. They believe when these people get up and argue that they're arguing the facts, when in essence, what both sides are trying to do, and this happens in every trial, is they're trying to manipulate the jury a certain way so that they see facts a certain way, so that they do a certain thing. And that's what's going on here, and that's why the jury is deadlocked. The fact of the matter is that there is someone on that jury that has a child or had a child that was not always thinking clearly, that even at the age of 17 couldn't necessarily make good choices. And as a result of that, they have a certain sympathy for Rowell. And they put him on the stand, which was a brilliant thing to do. Usually you don't do that because the prosecution tears them apart, and the prosecution did do a pretty good job of challenging him. But him being on the stand and you could watch him reliving this, you could tell that his emotions were genuine and that his testimony was, as far as he remembered it, accurate and truthful. It may not have jibed necessarily with the video, but that is a function of human memory. One of the things that I have found when I studied self defense interactions, where people have been involved perhaps in a scenario where they've had to draw their firearm and fire on someone, and that when they sit down to retell the story, they always leave parts of it out. And then when they go back, they're like, well, on the video, I saw you do this. When did that happen? And almost always they can't put it into the proper sequence, which is one of the reasons why, when I have had the opportunity to advise someone who's been in a self defense shooting, I have said, sit down with your lawyer, go through it front to back, go through it at least 6 or 7 times. You're going to get very frustrated with your lawyer because he's going to insist that you get the timeline right, and there's a good chance you won't get the timeline right. That's because human memory is malleable. We form it at the instant that that happens, and we make sort of a visual record of what's happened. But the other thing that we do, because we're human, is we leave out facts that are contrary to what we know. Because at a higher level in our brain, we think, wow, that could really hurt our self defense claim or whatever. And so, as a result of that, even though we're not intentionally lying, we leave things out and we form a memory, and that memory becomes the absolute truth to us. And as a result, that's what we operate on. Your mind forms a conclusion and it just ignores all of the contrary facts. And that's what happened with Valle. And I believe that's what's happened with this juror. This juror has made it up in their mind, his or her mind, that this kid, it's unfair to charge him with murder because those other kids were beating on him. And either they've had an experience similar in their life that perhaps they didn't disclose in voir dire, or they know someone who had a similar experience. And as a result of that, they are very sensitive to this idea that self defense is a thing and that the kid had a right to defend himself. And yeah, he may have gone back and gotten a knife and started slinging it at people, but he wasn't really a bad kid. I think that's what's at the heart of this juror who believes quite fervently that he is not guilty. Now I'm going to explain why I think the judge is a genius.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I did receive a note from you regarding count one and the fact that you are deadlocked on count one. That has been marked as Court Exhibit 7. Look, I recognize that most of you, if not all of you, have never been through this process before. There are numerous exhibits and many days of evidence to consider. I did instruct you to consider all the evidence. By the court's estimate, at the time that we received the note, which was 12:47 p.m., you had been deliberating for just about 2 hours or less. Please remember, each of the 4 counts must be deliberated upon separately. If you would like to deliberate on counts 2, 3, and 4, and then return to count 1, that is fine.
By sending them back to deliberate on the other counts, which again I think is brilliant because they're the assault counts, you set up a situation where if that juror can be convinced, okay, he did assault that kid with a knife, Didn't kill him, so, it's just assault. You might wind up having to go to jail for a couple of months, something like that. Well, then you set up the situation where why is that assault and it's not murder over here when the kid died? And a lot of times that's very helpful in getting somebody who is recalcitrant to come around and say, okay, all right, I got you. I understand. We're done. But also, the other good part about this, because the other counts do involve assault, is that if she is going to deadlock on all of those and the trial is going to end in a mistrial, it pretty much, because it's 11-1, ensures that the state is going to file this case again and prosecute and try and get a conviction in a second trial, which may seem unfair. I know we've had situations where people have said that's unfair, but a mistrial is like a trial never happened because the jury couldn't come to a unanimous verdict. It has to be unanimous at acquittal, it has to be a unanimous verdict at conviction, and if it's not, then there was no trial. Simple as that.
That's what I have for you today. I hope you found it helpful, interesting, or maybe both. If there's a subject you'd like me to discuss, please feel free to send me an email at the address above. If you like what we do, please feel free to subscribe and come on back to the beach tomorrow. I release videos every weekday, weather and work permitting. If you have the opportunity today, do a kindness for your fellow man. It makes the world a better place, one kind act at a time. And now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine that you might like.